FW de Klerk. Tributes are pouring in for the former president, dying at the age of 85 after losing his battle with lung cancer. There are mixed feelings, of course, about the Nobel laureate's legacy, whether as well he even deserved the Nobel laureate. Let's talk about this legacy, the presidency, the history. We need to find out which word various leaders want to talk about. Joining me this morning, there he is, COPE leader, Mosiuoa Lekota, of course, a former Robben Island political prisoner, joining us this morning. Mr. Lekota, good morning. Good to hear from you. Your feelings on the passing of FW de Klerk.
Well, first of all, one has to pass condolences to his family and friends. South Africa has lost one of her best leaders, I would say, because here is a man who came into the history of our country, found it in the grips of our apartheid rule, and grew up to lead the government that had introduced these policies of apartheid. And when his time came, he was sharp enough to come to terms with the fact that apartheid was not what South Africa deserved. And when his chance came, he led the country to move away from apartheid.
Mr. Lekota, let me ask you this question. I'm sure you would have seen some of the reaction. There seems to be very mixed views on the wording around Nelson Mandela. I'm asking you this question, Mr. Lekota, because as a former Robben Island inmate, I'm sure you have a view on this. On the point of the late FW de Klerk releasing Nelson Mandela, that's the wording, or if he gave in because he could see where the country was headed and there was no place for his political party and apartheid. What do you make of the wording that he released Nelson Mandela and brought him back to freedom? What's your opinion?
Sir, I think that he did release him. There was no leader amongst the whites at that time who had the courage to do that. People, it is easy to talk now after the fact, but for someone who was in his position, in a government which was at the height of its strength, he had to take a decision, and he took that decision. Very many who were around him did not have the courage not only to negotiate with him, but to move towards removing the obstacles and releasing Nelson Mandela. We were in prison. We had discussions with President Mandela, and we know that there was no unanimity about this matter among the leaders of the National Party. But he was quite firm that the way to go was to release Nelson Mandela and begin the process of negotiations.
A lot of criticism. I'm sorry, Mr. Lekota, please continue. I don't want to interrupt your story. I'm sorry. I apologize. Please continue.
I was just going to say that I remember going with some of my fellow prisoners to Victor Verster, where President Mandela was at that time held, to go and meet with him, to express the views of the prisoners on the island, and also to hear from him what was happening between himself and the leaders of the government. And I know that it was not easy. I know that there was no unanimity among the leaders of the National Party, but de Klerk had come across as firm that they should really proceed and negotiate.
Mr. Lekota, as my last question to you, perhaps just your reaction on some of the criticism levelled at the former President FW de Klerk that he wasn't outspoken enough against apartheid, not until much later in his life, and of course this last video that we saw. Do you think he should have spoken out more against apartheid, his role and the government of the time?
Well, my understanding of that situation is that it was critical for him to take the majority of the leadership of the National Party with him. And he couldn't have just ridden roughshod over the views of so many others. And he was careful enough to take as many as is possible, to make the majority come with him. And not to come across as adventurous. And he succeeded. Men such as Kobe Coetzee, for instance, were some of the few who were very strong, but the others were not so sure. So I think that he moved as he should have. He was successful in taking the majority with, but at the same time without alienating too many others who could have even organized, as we saw later on, some of the leaders of the National Party tried to organize a rebellion against him, but he managed to hold them together.
I appreciate your time in speaking to us this morning. Mosiuoa Lekota, COPE leader, of course, and very, very well versed in the politics of the time, 94, and as we were coming out of the apartheid government, moving into what we now know as our democracy in South Africa. Mr. Mosiuoa Lekota, I appreciate your time in joining us.